This is FBG Jen.
And FBG Kristen.
And I'm FBG Margot, host and producer. You're listening to the podcast that will help you keep a lid on the junk in the trunk and inspire you to live a happy and confident life.
Each episode, we chat with motivational experts and celebs and share our own candid adventures in being healthy.
If you're looking for a podcast that's equal parts hilarious and enlightening, well then welcome to the Fit Bottomed Girls podcast.
We're happy to say that Veridesk is a proud sponsor of the Fit Bottomed Girls podcast and our go-to choice for an active workspace. Veridesk quickly and easily transforms your desk into a standing desk, and you can try it all risk-free for 30 days with free shipping both ways. Find out more at veridesk.com. That's VARI desk.com.
Welcome back to the Fit Bottomed Girls podcast. This is FBG Margot, and on the line today we have Jen.
Hey.
And we have Kristen.
Hi. Jen, you did not sound very
I know, it's Thanksgiving week when this is coming out. You should be psyched.
Super psyched.
I think you're just sad because you weren't in on this interview today.
Right.
Kristen and I got to speak to, it's Dr. Stuart Farrimond. He's our guest today, and he wrote this excellent book. I freaked out over it. I said, of course, I got in contact with Kristen right away. Like, you need to get this book, and we need to have him on the show. So I got you the book, and you loved it. You said your husband actually really loved it. And the book is, by the way, called The Science of Cooking.
Yes. It's really cool. It's like for anybody who is interested in food, cooking, nutrition, the best ways to make things, the best ways to eat things, why it's good to do one thing versus another when it seems like it should be the same result. I mean, it just has a little bit of everything.
It's everything from baking to making sauces to like how to know if your egg is still good enough to eat and cook with, to the best knife you should have for cutting. It's even like he's a food scientist, so he even like looked into the best biscuit to dunk into your tea. Like that, he's like that specific with it. Yeah, he's a really interesting person. He had a brain tumor. He was a medical doctor, and he had a tumor, and then the tumor turned into, he had a form of epilepsy. So he couldn't practice medicine anymore, so he turned to teaching. And then he talks about it in the show today. But he loves science, and he loves food. And he just put them together and created this world for himself where he's an expert on it. And he told us, he wrote this book, by the way, in 6 months. And when you see this,
wow,
I know.
Yeah.
He said there was a lot of late nights, but if you're looking for a good Christmas gift, I would recommend it. But I guess I wanted to ask you guys what your favorite tips for cooking and food prep. What are your favorite kitchen prep hacks?
So lately, I have done sheet pan dinners, which I know this is like a thing in the internet, like on the internet. Like, it's not a new thing, but it is a new thing for me. And it is life-changing.
What is it?
We had leftover. So all you do, I mean, there are different varieties, but it's basically you chop up a bunch of or you have pieces of meat, you chop up some veggies, you put them all on a sheet, like a baking sheet that's got a rim on it, so because you're going to have juices and stuff. Then you toss with olive oil and seasoning, mix it all up in the sheet. So far we're talking about, these are the things that you dirty. The cutting board and your knife. And then the sheet. Mm-hmm. So you mix it all on the sheet, and you all put it in, like, you put it all together, 425 in the oven, roast until it's done. It does take about like an hour to get things like roasty, but all the flavors meld together, and it's delicious. We did bone-in chicken thighs and carrots, like 2-inch pieces of carrots, onions, like cubed, like big cubed sweet potatoes, and basically you just put it in all together. And then smoked paprika, a little bit of lemon juice I put on there, olive oil, salt and pepper, garlic powder, mix it all around, stick it in the oven, take it out like 20 minutes, like move everything because things will start to kind of like brown, especially all the veggies, keep them. And then eventually you just end up with these caramelized veggies that have so much flavor and are so delicious. And then the meat is like, the chicken was just cooked perfectly. Just like fall off. So much flavor. So wait, it's like, it's 10 minutes of like prep and chopping and very little cooking for a delicious meal. Like, I would serve it to people if they came over for dinner. It's that good.
So you cooked the meat with it at the same time?
All on one sheet.
Wow.
Single sheet.
You're blowing my mind.
Life-changing.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing.
I know. I was like, this is going to be good. Yeah, I found a real simple recipe, and then, of course, I Dr. Stu may be a little upset with me about this, but I kind of threw all the science of cooking out the window and just like used whatever I had. That's sometimes how I cook. But it turned out really well. So I made it into a recipe, and then we have the recipe on Fit Bottomed Eats, so we can make sure that the link is in so people can try it, because it is really, really good. And I wish that it's something that I've been making, I mean, for years, because it's so easy. And now that I've like looked at other recipes, you can do fish and veggies, or like pork chops and veggies and stone fruit. I mean, there's kind of like no end to what you can do here.
Wow.
Yeah. Even fish, Kristen, even fish.
Awesome.
So what about you, Kristen?
Awesome. So, I'm a really big fan of, and I'm going to say this wrong because I don't speak French, but mise en place, where it's the idea of preparing your dishes and ingredients, and having it all measured out and out in front of you before you begin.
It means everything in its place, I think.
Yes,
right?
Literally putting in place.
Putting in place.
Yeah. So I think that this also technically, like, if we want to be all like, snobby about it, like, I think it also refers to putting things away as you're done with them, which is not a thing that I do. Anyone who's ever been to my house can attest to that. But yeah, I really find the process of cooking and making something, even if it's a brand new recipe, so much easier if I've got it all out. And right now, like, we're heading into Thanksgiving, which I think we'll probably talk about a little bit later. For me, that often means that I'm making multiple things at the same time to make the best use of my time and of my oven and all of that. So having things like set out, organized, knowing what's going in what and when is huge. And then I even take that as far as to, when I'm hosting or something, like, I even create like a timeline saying when I need to start making something, when it needs to go into the oven, when it needs to come out, what's going to be in there with it. So it's a little more work on the front end, but once you get into the moment of actually doing all of the cooking and everything, it just makes it so seamless. It's really nice.
So for me, I don't eat a lot of grains. When I do, I really enjoy myself, and it's like things that I love in this world: pizza and bagels. I can't have them every day. Obviously, they're not that good for you, but occasionally you have to have them. And two things I can tell you about reheating or storing bagels especially. You take a bagel, you cut it in half, and you put it in the freezer, and then you toast it in the toaster oven. It'll come out perfect. If you try to take a bagel that's frozen and then nuke it and then cut it in half and then put it in the toaster or whatever, or just let it defrost, it's never right. It's never right. You got to cut it right away and put it in the freezer right away, and it'll always be perfect. And it'll stay for like a month or so. So that's my bagel tip.
Wow.
Cut them in half. Trust me, it'll change your life. And and pizza, you can reheat in a frying pan with just a little bit of olive oil, and it'll come back just the way it was the day before. And those are my two big tips. Not healthy, okay, but just when you're treating yourself, why not? So those
have it taste good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if you're gonna eat pizza, like,
exactly.
Make it good.
Yeah, make it awesome.
Yeah.
So we were talking. This is not technically a cookbook. It's the science of cooking. It's all about what it is to cook, and it's what it is about to how to store fish and everything, like how to store eggs, how to all this stuff. So I wanted to ask you guys, do you have a favorite cookbook that you use over and over again, and what is it? So who wants to go first?
You want me to go?
Yeah.
Sure.
I have two that immediately came to mind. There is a book by Ted Allen called Chopped. It's like based off of the TV show. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what it is about the cookbook. I mean, it's like really, really delicious, but there just seems to be a lot of recipes that I come back to time and time again, or that I use so much that I have committed them to memory, which I think is kind of the sign that a cookbook is really your jam. So he's got a recipe in there for a tropical kale salad that is steamed kale with mango and peanuts and red pepper, and then you actually cut up half the mango and then use the other half. You put half the mango cut up in the salad and use the other half reserved to make a dressing, where you also put peanuts in there and red wine vinegar, and that kind of taught me, I'm like, okay, so this is how you make a really good dressing. I understand, put half the mango in there. So that's just so delicious. And I want to say we have that recipe published somewhere where I've made enough of a tweaks on it. I think so too. So I'll see if I can find that. It's so good. And then the other one that I use all the time is, you guys know I'm a big Nom Nom paleo fan. Her 2 cookbooks, so good, use them all the time. But her most recent one, the Ready, Set, Go, like the second one she did, she has a recipe that she says in the intro she adapted from Tim Ferriss, because he was looking for a way to start his morning with something that was very nutritionally dense, high protein, high in healthy fat, but that was also sustainable and had a good fat or healthy fat ratio, so your omega-3s to omega-6s. And he came up with this dish that's like, I don't even remember the name of it, but it's sardines. It involves sardines packed in olive oil. And I remember looking at it and reading it and being like, if freaking Nom Nom Paleo and Tim Ferriss, who's like the king of productivity, like if it's working for them, I'm like, maybe I'm going to try this. So I tried it, and it has now become something that I make, like at least once a week. I'll make kind of like meal prep it when I have time, and then just keep eating it. And it is a can of sardines with the olive oil drained. They're kind of mashed up, along with like some avocado, some lime juice, some mustard, salt and pepper, paprika. I usually put a little bit of garlic powder in, and you just and pickles, and then you smash it all together. It's kind of like a tuna salad, except it's sardines. Mm-hmm. And it tastes good. The sardines, I really was like, I thought there'd be more of an ick factor with them, and it's actually a very mild fish, and they really are like sustainable. They're low in mercury, and they're high in omega-3. So if you're looking to bust out of your comfort zone a little bit for something really, really healthy, I encourage you to check it out. I know it sounds weird, but it's really tasty. And sometimes this is not recommended by Nom Nom Paleo or Tim Ferriss, I believe, but it's also good if you eat it with tortilla chips.
Oh, absolutely.
So many things are good with tortilla chips,
right? Yeah,
for being real.
True. I'll be like, here's a spinach leaf on a tortilla chip.
By the way, at Whole Foods, I don't know if they have them where you are, but they sell now a gluten-free tortilla chip, and it's made with coconut flour, and it is crazy delicious.
What's it called?
Yeah, it has there's one with sea salt and there's one with nacho flavor, and you can't tell the difference, and it's so good. That's. I'm sorry.
Siete? It's the Siete?
Yeah.
Yeah. They're okay. Side note, I mean, you can have like corn tortillas, but they're not grain-free, obviously.
Right.
But the Siete, they actually, have you ever had they're like flour tortillas, but they're kind of like flour tortillas, like not chips, but just tortillas.
No, I haven't tried it yet. This is new to me.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So I reviewed some for Eats, I believe, and they are delicious, because I tried so many gluten-free wraps and tortillas and stuff that just kind of fell apart and just didn't have really that much flavor. They kind of had a weird aftertaste, and these are fantastic.
Well, I recommend their chips. So
yeah, and it's just delicious. Yeah, but the tortillas were the thing that really blew my mind.
That's awesome. Oh, what about you, Kristen?
I have a lot of cookbooks, which I'm sure doesn't surprise anybody. And I don't know that I really have one in particular that I go to all the time, but I do find that I have the Runner's World cookbook. I find that one is a really good one for inspiration, because it really runs the gamut of all different types of food, and obviously they were all created with runners in mind. So I do like that one, and it's got some really interesting stuff. There's a walnut and mushroom taco recipe sounds super weird and is really quite good. And then the whole protein vegetarian is another one that I do like a lot, because I don't eat meat, but I do try to get a lot of high quality proteins. So that one is super handy. And then I think it's also Kitchen Intuition, which has all the recipes, which we interviewed Devin Sisson, I don't know, a few months ago, I guess. And that one, and I think the reason I like that one so much, as we talked about in that show, is the fact that I really like being inspired by recipes. I don't always follow them perfectly. I don't always I very rarely actually follow them perfectly. I usually add in flavors that I like or take out things that I don't want to eat. And hers is really great for that because she basically is telling you, hey, this is what you should do. This is what I like. But if you like something else, here are some other ideas. So yeah, those. And then I mean, people just send me recipes all the time because they know that I like playing around in the kitchen and trying new things. So like the internet, I guess, is kind of the other one. And then I am old school where sometimes I'll print them out. I have a book that just has like sheets of things stuffed in there that I keep going to.
I have one of those.
Me too.
Yep. With like I used to put them. Now I'm thinking about it. I think it's still in my closet over here, actually. That has just like hundreds of pages of things I ripped out from like Cooking Light from when I was like 20.
Yeah, the same here when I first moved to New York and I was first learning how to cook. And my first job, actually, this book that we're talking about today was published by DK Publishing. That was my first job in New York. I worked for DK Publishing in New York.
Really?
Yeah, and they have beautiful cookbooks. If you ever know about, if you look them up, they have gorgeous cookbooks. And they have this one. It was just like the ultimate kitchen cookbook or something like that. It was just this utilitarian cookbook. And it's the first cookbook I had on my own that I owned. And I just stuffed recipes in there constantly. And then over the years, I hosted Thanksgiving. I had to learn how to cook a Thanksgiving turkey. So I shoved a recipe in the book there. And it's all yellowing and stuff like that. But I'll never get rid of that cookbook because it meant so much to me.
Yeah.
You know? And then the other one I really love, and I go back to it all the time, and I asked you guys, give me a minute to run to the living room to grab it, but it's Practical Paleo, and it's Diane Sanfilippo, and it's just a fantastic cookbook. And I know paleo, it's a meat, people think it's meat centric, but it's actually more about cooking vegetables and how to cook them properly. And she has amazing recipes, and she has really great recipes for spices, for different kinds of spices and how to use them together, like smoky paprika, whatever. And it's just a really great cookbook. If you guys are looking for something, this Christmas, it's the holidays that we're going to be putting this out there. So there's some really great ideas, especially for group cooking and cooking for a lot of people. And I guess I just wanted to ask you guys, because this is going to be posting the week of Thanksgiving. What are you guys doing for Thanksgiving? Do you go someplace? Do you host people? What's going on for you guys this year?
We have hosted here, my family, a few times, but kind of as our family has grown, it's sometimes more difficult to host like a big group. But I've been going to my parents' house, and we tend to like tag team the cooking a lot, which is really, really nice. Like my dad will smoke a turkey. He's like really good at smoking meats of all kinds. So smoked turkey is always awesome. But usually my husband and I are in charge of desserts because I'm gluten-free, so I'm kind of like the pain in the ass. So I usually am the one that's like, oh no, I got the desserts, I can make it, because I want to make sure that I can eat something.
Yeah, sure.
So I'll do like the pumpkin pie. Yeah. And then I have an Alana's Pantry recipe that I use a lot that's like a chocolate pecan pie that's really good, where you just like press the pie crust into the pan, so you don't have to like roll anything out. It's really, really good and tasty. And then whipped potatoes. Like we take whipped potatoes to Christmas stuff with family and Thanksgiving. And my grandmother taught me how to make mashed potatoes since like the time I can remember. And it's so simple because it's literally just baking potatoes that are, peeled, boiled until they're soft. And then you mix in milk and a little bit of butter. And I like them over salted, so I over salt them.
I like them lumpy.
I know. No, and then they're like whipped. I mean, so you get out like the mixer and you whip them and you keep adding more and more milk until you get the consistency that you want. And that is like that to me. Whipped potatoes, mashed potatoes are something that are so special that I only have usually those few times a year, but I really enjoy, and they just kind of like, that's what the holidays taste like for me.
Me too. My grandmother's from the South, and she loves to cook. Yeah. And they love their mashed potatoes in the South. Like she's all about, and she made her own gravy from scratch. And with the drippings in the pan and everything. It was so good. Yeah, that always makes me think of the holidays.
Yep.
What are you doing, Kristen? You guys have a special turkey thing you guys do over there, right?
Yeah, so we host. We've hosted for quite a few years, and we host my family and my husband's family, and then we are very much a like anybody who's in town, come celebrate with us. Which is super fun for me because I'm the only child of two only children, and 3 of my grandparents passed away when I was really young. So we always had really small celebrations. You know, Christmas dinner was, or, you know, Thanksgiving dinner didn't really seem like a much different night than a lot of other nights, just because it was, you know, it was like the 4 of us,
right?
And that, as it usually was. So it's really exciting for me to have like a whole house full of people and lots of stuff going on. And yeah, and it ends up being a bit of a group effort. We have an infrared turkey fryer that my husband makes the turkey with every year. So it's like a fried turkey, but it is healthier. And he's kind of perfected it over the last year or so. So he still gets like a nice crispy skin, I guess. This is knowledge.
We're talking about meat again.
Yeah, I know. All we do is talk about meat on this show. And then my mom has a few things that she always takes, like the dressing, and she makes pumpkin pies, and she usually handles the mashed potatoes. And then I just sort of put it up for grabs for whoever wants. If people have things that they make, awesome. My mother-in-law does a wonderful job with doing like amazing appetizers and snacky bits, because we usually start with like Bloody Marys and mimosas early-ish with a whole snacking table. And that way people, even if they do have Thanksgiving plans, if they'd still like to come by and say hello, it's easy for people to come in, have a little snack with us, sit and chat, and then go on to whatever they have going on that day. And then I think probably the dish that I make that people get very excited about is I do a jalapeno corn pudding, which is like super delicious, not much in the way of redeeming nutritional value, which is why we only have it like once a year. But it's so good. I think we have enough people coming this year that I think I'm going to be making like 2 big batches of that. Yeah, and I think it's going to be a big one this year, so I'm pretty excited.
Very cool.
Yeah. How about you, Margot? What are you doing?
So I have friends that live on the other side of Prospect Park in Brooklyn, and they have a really nice sized place, and it's just like a bunch of people, and we just kind of show up, and there's like a couple of dozen of us at this point. And I always bring the cranberry cornbread. It's I make it, and it has a little bit of candied ginger mixed in with it. And it is, I have to tell you guys, it is so dope. It is the best thing you'll ever taste. And I get requests for it for Thanksgiving and Christmas every year. Everybody wants it. They want to bring it. So I make batches of it between Thanksgiving and New Year's. Like almost every weekend I'm in my kitchen stuck making this stuff. But it's so tasty and good. I'll put the recipe in the show notes. It's a Martha Stewart recipe. But oh my God. I'm getting hungry now just thinking about all this food, you guys.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah. So I guess we should go and get something to eat for us, but we'll start the show now with Dr. Stu.
Yeah.
Did you know that being more active at work, like standing more and sitting less, can help improve your health, reduce back pain, boost energy, and increase both your metabolism and your productivity? True story. And our favorite way to get those benefits is with Veridesk. See for yourself at veridesk.com. That's VARI desk.com.
Specializing in food science, Dr. Stuart Farrimond, aka Dr. Stu, is a science and health writer, presenter, and educator. He has conducted wide-ranging food science research and makes regular appearances on TV, radio, and at public events, and his writing appears in national and international publications, including the BBC, the Daily Mail, and New Scientist. Dr. Stu is an experienced science communicator and founded the online lifestyle science magazine Guru, which won support from the Wellcome Trust, the world's largest medical research charity. He is here today to talk about his new book from DK Publishing, The Science of Cooking, Every Question Answered to Perfect Your Cooking. Welcome to the show, Dr. Stu.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much for having me.
Well, today on the line, it's myself, Margot, FBG Margot, and on the line today from Florida, we have FBG Kristen.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
So I'm lucky enough to ask you the first question. I get plenty of books about food and cooking sent to my attention for review, but as soon as I started flipping through The Science of Cooking, I was just completely knocked out by all of the amazing information and tips inside. Can you please give us a little bit about your background and how the book came to be?
My background, I'm a medical doctor originally, and 10 years ago I had to leave medicine I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, as it happened, and I had surgery, and then I developed epilepsy afterwards, which forced me to leave medicine. I then went into teaching, and at that point, I discovered the real joy in explaining to people the science of the world around them. I was teaching kind of 16, 17-year-old, mostly girls, and they hated the whole idea of science. They wanted to go and do nursing and kind of caring jobs. And I wanted to show them that science wasn't this boring academic thing that you just you sit in a classroom and you get fed facts. It's a way of seeing the world around you in a new way and appreciating actually the wonder of the world that's around us. And so from teaching, I kind of evolved into going into science writing and science communicating. And then I kind of fell into a niche of food science research. And I ended up doing various bits of food science research for a variety of companies, looking at such eclectic things as which is the best biscuit to dunk in your cup of tea or your cup of coffee, and how to cook the perfect burger, and which beer is the gassiest. And DK Books got in touch with me, and they said, we've got this idea for writing a book about the science of cooking. Would you be interested? And I was just blown away, because it's the kind of book that I've always wanted to write. I remember when I was at university and I was just getting into cooking, and I was thinking I'd love to write a book about the science of cooking. And so I snatched their hand off, and 6 months or so later, this is the fruit of my labours. Yes, and it kind of covers pretty much every kind of aspect of cooking you can imagine. There's 160 questions answered, and the whole idea is that it's a practical, understandable book, because I'm a big believer in that you don't need jargon to understand the science of what's going on around you. And so I was really keen that we didn't put any jargon in there, and that we made everything understandable, but without watering down the facts and what it's actually really all about. That's the book, and my dream, my heart is that people would enjoy the book, and that they'd use it to let them cook with more joy, to be able to experiment, to be able to do things that they thought I had to be a restaurant chef to do. There's stuff in there like how to cure salmon, which you can just do at home with some salt and some household stuff, or how to smoke meat. As I say, delighted that you're enjoying the book.
Yeah, well, and it's not just us who's loving it. This is one of the things that arrived at my house, and my husband actually snatched it up immediately and got really excited. And that's not always the case with the things that I receive to review. So thank you for that.
Pleasure, yeah.
And, I have to say, my jaw dropped a little bit when you said 6 months later, this book came to be, because, it is. I mean, we're looking at 200 and some pages, 250 pages, give or take, of information. And I had assumed that you had to spend quite a lot longer than that researching it. So anyway, that blew my mind. But speaking of a
lot of late nights.
Oh, I can't even imagine. But speaking of having minds blown, I'm wondering if there is maybe one specific fact in there that you learned while researching and writing this book, or maybe one thing that you did know that you think readers will be just totally shocked to learn. Anything that was just like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was the case. Gotta share this. Amazing.
That's a really good question, and you're the second person to have asked me that today. And and the first time I went, oh, I don't really know, and then I all of a sudden gave them 10 things that I thought were the most amazing thing ever. But I will give you a fact about ice cream, because I think ice cream is one of the most fantastic foods. I think it should almost have its own food group. But ice cream, most of the ice cream that we buy in the shops is about 50% air, which I think is quite impressive.
Really?
Yeah. It's how they make soft serve ice cream. Is that if you think about it. Like, so if you freeze cream, I don't know if you ever have cream in your fridge and maybe your fridge is set too low, then it turns solid. It's rock solid. And I remember when I was a kid, the ice cream that I used to get used to be really hard. You had to take it out of the freezer for like quarter of an hour before you could even get a spoon into it. But nowadays we get this kind of your Ben and Jerry's stuff, and you can just eat it out of the pot. And that's because this soft serve ice cream idea was created. And if you blend it with air, it basically makes it softer. And fluffier, and you have this really nice mouthfeel. It doesn't freeze as hard, and we've got a nice diagram there which shows you kind of it's bubbles of air surrounded by like sugary syrup and ice crystals that hold it in there all together. And so that's the secret behind soft serve super creamy ice cream.
So if you were to drop by my kitchen and look through the utensils drawers, and let's just be frank, all the drawers and cupboards, you would be surprised how much stuff I have just crammed in there. What are the utensils we really need to keep on hand, and what are the things we could definitely get rid of or donate to Goodwill?
I think generally gadgets that just do one thing, they're often a waste of time. The things that every cook needs is you need a decent knife, and every cookbook and chef will tell you that. But you need a good chef's knife, one that's kind of got a wide edge to it so that you can crush garlic with the side. You need a good chef's knife. And there's a lot of difference between the quality of chef's knives. And there's a difference between stamped knives and forged knives. And you can there's stuff in the book about how to spot the difference between the two, but a forged knife is much sturdier than a stamped knife. A stamped knife is they get a sheet of metal and they just like a stencil cut out the shape of the knife, and they put a handle around it and then sharpen the edge, and that's your knife. And they're quite weak. They're generally not very good quality, whereas a forged knife has been created more like the old-fashioned way of your blacksmith hammering metal over an anvil. It's obviously not done with an anvil, but you've had actually a forging process going on. And so when you're looking at the knife, if you notice that the very point end is narrower than the where it reaches the handle, that means almost certainly that it's been forged, and that's a good marker of a good knife. There's different kind of metals you can get. I think that a good quality stainless steel knife is good. In the past, you'd always say that stainless steel isn't very good. It doesn't rust, but it blunts very easily. But nowadays, the quality of the stainless steel that we've got is very good. So I think a good quality stainless steel chef's knife is important. And you need a bread knife as well. And you can just use a cheap bread knife because you can't sharpen them. So don't worry too much about the bread knife that you have. Although I would say that the fewer serrations, the better. And the reason for that is that when you cut with a serrated knife, what you're doing is the points. You're piercing the surface of the food, or if it's like a tomato or a loaf of bread, because it's a smooth edge. It's difficult to cut, but those pointy bits, they dig in, and the pressure that you're pushing down just forms this tiny little point, and then when you pull backwards and forward, the scalloped sharp edges cut under the food, and the fewer points you have, the sharper, the more force they will exert on the food to pierce it. So in the same way that if you've got high heels on and you're walking across grass, the high heel is likely to sink into the mud because it's a small point. So in the same way you want lots of small points rather than, so not too many small points rather than lots and lots of points, because lots of points will spread the force out over a wider area and it won't cut as well. And the other thing I would say is get a digital thermometer, an instant read digital thermometer, one that you can just put into Whatever it is you're cooking, you can use it for cakes, you can use it for meat. You put it in, and then you push a little button, and it tells you the temperature, and so you know when meat is done, and you never have that problem of, say, serving up fish, and you cut into it, and it's still raw in the middle. So I would say they're the top 3 things that you must have.
Excellent. Maybe I have some shopping to do. Maybe some purging too.
Have you got one of those thermometers? Have you got a kind of a meat thermometer or a cooking thermometer?
I do, but it's not digital.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say that the ones that do quickly are really versatile. So if you get a really good quality one that has a big range of temperatures, you can even use it for making candy. So caramelizing and doing kind of sugar work. You can even use it for that, so you don't even need to get a sugar thermometer if that's the kind of thing that you want to do.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as you were researching and writing this book, did that change anything about the way you cook or like the foods that you order when you're in restaurants?
Yes, there's certain things that I would now never do. So I wouldn't put olive oil into the pasta water. Pretty much every cookery book says to stop the pasta sticking, put some olive oil into the water. And so we just kind of do it, put a glug of our olive oil in, but it makes no difference whatsoever. And when you think about it, that makes sense. And if you look, I presume, do you guys do that? If you're cooking pasta, do you put in a glug of olive oil?
Yeah.
I do not.
I do.
Don't bother. If you look when you do it, the oil just stays on the surface like an oil slick, and so it doesn't stop the pasta sticking at all. It just sort of floats on the surface and doesn't do anything at all. The way to stop your pasta sticking is to make sure that you use plenty of water and you stir, because after about 2 or 3 minutes of it being in the boiling water, the outside of the hard pasta becomes sticky. And as it gets sticky, the pasta bits can get stuck together. And so all you need to do for the first 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes is just make sure that you stir. You stir well. And then that will stop it sticking, and the oil has nothing to do with it whatsoever. If you want oil, if you like the flavour of olive oil, then just put it on afterwards. There you go.
Okay. So you answered my question before. Like, my third question, was going to be about knives and kitchenware, but you answered that beautifully. So I want to ask you something about conscious shopping, and that's about whether heritage meats, corn-fed chicken, or organic food. First of all, do they actually taste any better, and are they actually better for you and the environment?
That's a really good question, and you have to say yes and no. There is a lot of hype around going for, your heritage meats and your corn-fed chicken. And if you were to take scientific experiments and get right down to the brass tacks of it all, the nutritional benefits of going for an organic chicken over an indoor caged chicken is very small. Yes, there are higher omega-3s and more beneficial balance of fats in your organic meat, but taken as a whole, it's pretty negligible. So for example, if you want to get lots of omega-3, you eat oily fish. You don't go and eat a cow that's had grass, for example. The reason why you should do it, I think, are for other reasons, of welfare, animal welfare, because in the book we've got a nice kind of diagram which shows the differences in space that chickens get when they're in organic, or they're in free range, or they're indoor reared. And it's horrific. It's absolutely terrifying. And you can go to YouTube and you can look at the videos of what it's like inside these the chicken slaughterhouses and how the horrendous conditions that they're in. So I think, if nothing else, yes, there are some minor health benefits from going for your organic, outdoor reared meat options, but over and above that, when I'm eating, and I'm sure it's the same with you, I want to be able to know that I'm not eating something that suffered unnecessarily for my personal enjoyment. And I'm of the opinion that I don't mind paying a bit more for my meat and having meat less often if that means that I'm encouraging good husbandry of animals. In terms of corn-fed, if something is corn-fed chicken, for example, it doesn't reflect the welfare of the animal at all. It just means that it's been fed on maize and corn, and so it has a kind of a yellowish sort of colour to it. So it gives it a slightly different flavour, and there are some purported health benefits to it, but essentially it's a bit of a gimmick.
Yeah, I actually don't eat meat other than seafood for the welfare reason, but I always I tell people I try not to be a dick about being a vegetarian, because one day maybe I will want to eat it, and in that case, like I feel the same way about it as you. Like, I would prefer to eat something that I know was at least, while it was alive, had a reasonable life,
Yeah, and I think an organic, there's one of the big selling points of organic is that it's only had organic feed and lots of other things about specific not having pesticides and things on it. That isn't the main reason that I would say that you should prefer organic, but organic gives you the best guarantee, if you're just in a supermarket, say, of knowing that animal has been treated well. But better than that, actually, I would say, is that if you've got a local butcher,
yep,
then go to them and you'll be able to know where the meats come from. And because sometimes, again, just because it's got organic on it doesn't mean that it's been done in the spirit of it. So you could just about do everything minimal to get that organic label and yet still not treat your animals very well. Whereas you could have a local farm that doesn't meet the organic certified status, but they treat their animals extremely well, and you're getting a better quality product at the end of it. Because if an animal's been treated well, then the meat itself is actually a bit better. It tastes a bit better, especially during the process in which they're killed. If they're very stressed at that point, then the adrenaline goes round through their blood and their veins, and their muscles use up all the energy stores that they've got in those the last hours of their life, and that actually results in the meat being poor quality. It becomes dry and firm and more tasteless than if the animal has been well cared for.
Wow. So the other day I was talking to one of my Fit Bottomed Eats writers, and we were talking about flavors that work well in certain ways, but not in others. Like, so nobody wants to eat pumpkin spiced fish, right? But like a maple glazed salmon, heck yeah. And, and then in other ways you would think, like in terms of desserts, like pumpkin spice and maple, like those seem kind of similar, but they're not. And you have this really interesting graphic near the beginning of the book, explaining why some flavors go really well together. Like beef works well with coffee, beef works well with onion, coffee, no.
You got it.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it's a pretty complex graphic, so obviously we're not going to talk through the whole thing. But I wondered if you have just a little information that you can share on the science behind why that is, because it's weird. And when you start really looking at the breakdown, I'm like, oh, you're right. Those don't go together. And the thing in between them is perfect with both. I don't understand why.
Yeah. That diagram actually took a lot of time to get it as kind of simple as it is.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because it's a huge topic. There's recently, the last sort of 5 or 10 years, this science of food pairing has kind of come to the fore. And the reason why some foods go together well is that they share some of the flavor compounds in them. The foods that we eat, the reason they have flavors is there are certain chemicals, certain molecules in them that give them their flavor. Actually, what happens when you eat, all the kind of the subtle flavors, you aren't sensing those on your tongue. It's going up the back of your mouth, and it's wafting up into your nose from kind of like the rear entrance. And when your nose senses it, when it's coming from the back, you have this illusion, this hallucination that it's actually coming from your tongue. So you're smelling it, but your brain tells you that it's coming from your tongue. So coffee, for example, there are over 200 specific individual chemicals that give coffee its very unique flavor and its aroma. And scientists have catalogued all the different flavor molecules, all the ones that we know about that exist in all different foods. And they found that when you charted them, some foods shared the same flavor compound, the same substances that give them their flavor. And those ingredients also tasted good together. So, for example, one thing that I only discovered in my adult life was maple syrup and bacon. And I know you guys will probably laugh because that's such an obvious thing to eat in America. But over here, it's something that isn't really done. But those two ingredients have flavor compounds that they both have. And so that crossover gives it a kind of a harmony so that when you eat it, it just goes together well. So in that example, so beef, for example, shares flavor compounds with lots of other things. So it shares some flavor compounds with onion, and it shares some flavor compounds with coffee. But those two individual things are quite different on their own. So you don't have oniony coffee.
I am a meat eater, and we have at the time that we're recording it, we're going to have the holidays coming up, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. And by the way, I think the science of cooking would make a great holiday gift, let me just say. So you have a few cooking myths that you bust, and one of them is basting a turkey will not keep it moist. So as we were heading into the season, so how do we best cook that turkey? And may I ask also the pot roast and ham, because those are the things I'm going to be having and cooking.
Okay, we tend not to do pot roast over here, I'll be honest with you. But in terms of the, so when you say pot roast, how do you do that?
I put it in the oven, and I include veggies, and it's usually kind of fatty, and I have olive oil on it and pepper, and you cook it at a really high temperature, and then you turn the oven off. Okay. And then let it sit, and then you gotta let it sit there. It's the perfect roast. I'll find that recipe and I'll put it in the show notes. I got it actually. It's like
that's great.
Yeah, it's one of those bachelor websites, like Bachelor Cooking. Like
so
Esquire magazine featured it.
Nice. Do you put it in? Is it in a liquid or is it just in like an oven?
No, in the oven.
Tray?
In the oven, and you get a pot roast rack, and it's got to be very fatty.
Okay.
Yeah, you cook it like super high, and then you turn the oven off, and you leave it alone for like 2.5 hours. And then you take it out and let it settle just a little bit, and it's perfect. So there's my tip for you, by the way.
Brilliant. Yeah, we kind of do similar things, but we just don't call it pot roast. So now I know. So for when you're basting, it doesn't make it more moist. What you're actually doing is you're giving the outside a nicer, crispier edge and a more flavorful edge. Because when you're spooning on that oil and the liquid from the that's been coming off the bird, you're essentially coating it with oil and you're frying the surface. So that's what's giving it the crispy coating. It doesn't get. You kind of think, if I put it on there, then maybe the liquid gets soaked into the meat. But it doesn't. It isn't true because meat is made up of countless little muscle fibers, which are kind of hair width little fibers, and they've got when the meat is fresh, there's liquid in each of those little fibers, the individual cells, and as you cook it, they squeeze down, and and like a sponge, the liquid inside gets squeezed out, and so you putting liquid on it. You've got a squeezed sponge. You can't get anything in there anymore. So it just rolls off the surface, and you see that when you put liquid on there, the kind of it sort of rolls off the edge. It doesn't soak in. It's not it's not an empty sponge. It's something that you can't get any more liquid into, which incidentally is why marinades, you can marinate something for a really long time, but the flavor doesn't actually soak in very far at all, for the same reason there just isn't the space for liquid to get inside meat. But if you want to have a moist turkey, a moist bird, one of the best things to do is to lay it flat. So a technique called spatchcocking. So you break it down the kind of the backbone, and then you can lay it flat, and that means that it cooks evenly, because the longer that your meat is in the oven, the more it will dry out. So the idea is to let heat get into the middle and cook it as much as possible without letting it be in the oven for too long, so that all the moisture is lost. And if you've got a whole bird, then the bulk of the bird with all the breast is going to take a long time to cook if it's all kind of in one big round, fully formed ball, while the legs and the wings will cook really quickly. So the best way to do it is to spread it out. Better still is to break it apart. Although the problem is that you like to serve it on the table as one whole thing, don't you?
That's what I was going to say, right, with the stuffing and everything.
Yeah, that is the problem. You can leave it in salty water the night before. Some people do that. I know that's. Do you guys do that?
Brining.
Brining. Yeah. Do you do that?
Yep.
It's okay. I mean, what's your experiences with brining?
I think it's okay. It's fine.
So we do it, and of course I don't actually eat it, so I can't. This is all secondhand relayed information. But for Thanksgiving, we host, and we have an infrared fryer, so it's like an oilless fryer that we make our turkey with, which is awesome because then it leaves the whole oven open to me to make all of the things that I want to make, and all the, everyone else can go outside with the turkey. And my husband has, I think it's maybe Alton Brown's brine recipe with, I don't know, lots of fruits and different things, and he swears by it. He loves it. I don't think he would do it any other way. But I also don't know how much of that has to do with the method of cooking. It might be different if we were putting it in the oven, or if we were spatchcocking it, which I just really like to say.
It's a great word. Great word.
It is.
The flavors themselves won't really penetrate very far. They will give the outside some flavor. The flavor molecules can't penetrate very far. They maybe get the first sort of few millimeters or so. So you're never going to get it all the way into the middle. But the salty water does work. The salt goes into the meat. We say it's this process called osmosis. You might remember that from your school days. But essentially, the salt goes into the meat, and as it goes into the meat, it kind of pulls some of the liquid with it, and so you're managing to squeeze more liquid into this already filled sponge, if you like, if you use my kind of a sponge analogy. So it works a bit, but it's not brilliant. There's only so much liquid you can get into your bird. The best thing is to not overcook it. But the one thing I would say about turkey is that it does inherently taste quite dry. It doesn't have much fat in it. It doesn't have much of what's called connective tissue. Connective tissue is the whitish coloured stuff that you see. You tend to see a lot of it in cuts of beef. And that when you slow cook things, that breaks down into gelatin, which has this kind of velvety, smooth mouthfeel to it. It's the same thing that means that lets Jello set, gelatin. And because turkey doesn't have any of that, the flavor profile, it doesn't have an abundance of different flavor molecules. It inherently tastes quite dry. So the secret is also what you serve it with. So the kind of the gravy, the sauce. Ideally, you want something that is rich, that has fat in it. That ideally has some of the gelatin in that you've maybe used from the kind of what's at the bottom of the roasting tray. They're the sort of things that will lift your turkey dish.
Wonderful. Now, anybody who loves spicy food has had that moment where they've made a dish and they're really excited about it, and they made it too hot to enjoy. So I wondered if you'd share your tips for making sure that you're adding the right amount of spice. And then also, is it possible to tone down a dish that's too spicy, or to, get your lips back after you've eaten something that has burned them straight off?
Yes and no. Chili is a really interesting thing. Chili is actually the thing that makes it hot is a poison. It's called capsaicin. It's the same stuff that's in pepper spray. It's a horrible it's a very unpleasant substance that is the defense mechanism of the chili. And it's designed so that animals don't eat it. Although, interestingly, birds are immune to it. They can't taste chili heat. So animals leave it alone. Birds eat the bright red little chili peppers. They fly off and then they spread the seeds far and wide. So that's how they propagate.
That's
chili,
cool.
Is that amazing? That's
I had no idea.
Nature being really smart. But what it does is it tricks, when you have something hot, that capsaicin molecule, the same thing that's in pepper spray, tricks your nerve fibers, your pain nerves in your mouth and anywhere else in the body as it happens, to feel hot, burning pain. What it does, the molecule goes into, it takes a few seconds to work. We all know this. If you have something hot, you go, oh, that's not too bad. And then 15 seconds later, your mouth is burning. That's because that molecule takes a little while just to go into your tongue, and it latches into the pain fibers. There are particular pain fibers that are just designed to sense when your mouth is burning. These molecules go in there and they latch onto them and they make them fire. So your brain thinks, oh my gosh, I've eaten something really hot and unpleasant. My mouth is burning. So your brain thinks there's something over 42, 45 degrees C or hotter in your mouth, regardless of the temperature of the food itself. Now, how do you tone it down if that has happened? The problem is that when you've eaten it, that molecule has already got into that pain fiber, and there ain't no getting it out. You just got to bide your time, and 15 minutes or so, it will have the nerve fiber should have recovered, and you should be back to normal. There are things though that can make it can amplify the chilliness, and there are some things that can make it a bit better. The one thing that I often have heard said is that if you have beer with a curry, that will take away the heat. Fizzy drinks are probably one of the worst things, like your beers and your lagers, probably one of the worst things you can have with chili food, because the fizzing, the effervescence that's in your mouth when you're eating it, that sensitizes your tongue even more, so it makes it hotter. The only thing that beer does do is it makes you a bit drunk, so it just kind of numbs all your senses, so perhaps that way it doesn't make you feel the effects so much. What you can do is you can try to trick your mouth into telling your brain this actually isn't hot. You think you're feeling burning heat, but it's really not hot. And so you can do things like ice, for example, or cool yogurt and milk. They're things that give your brain signals to say that your mouth isn't really burning. They can help a bit. And interestingly, mint and menthols, they do the reverse of what the chili does. They have substances that latch onto the cool sensing nerve fibers in your tongue, which is why mint has this kind of, they put mint into chewing gums and toothpaste, because it has this cooling effect, because for the same reason it's tricking your brain into thinking there's something cool in your mouth. So by doing these things, mints, yogurts and milks, and if it gets desperate, try ice. You're just trying to persuade your brain to know that this isn't actually burning your mouth. Training helps as well. You just get used to it after a while.
So I eat eggs for breakfast almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
What are your best tips for storing eggs, and how long can they keep fresh?
Yes. This is quite a controversial one. It's one of those things that you think, oh, eggs is an egg, but then when you bring it up in conversation, everybody's got an opinion on how they look after their eggs, how they cook their eggs, and everybody else is wrong unless you do it your way. What the science says is that, generally speaking, for many purposes, room temperature eggs are better. So if you are poaching or frying, a room temperature egg is best, because if it's cold, it cools the pan down. So if you're frying an egg, it will cool the pan down. It will mean that the white spreads out further, and it's not going to cook as well. It'll take longer to cook. If you're making cake, it's also better at room temperature, because when you're beating the egg, if it's warmer, if it's at room temperature, then as you're beating, you're unwinding, you're unraveling, you're breaking apart proteins that are in the egg. And that happens more easily at room temperature. So if you use room temperature eggs, you get a finer, more even crumb. If you're trying to separate eggs, so say you're making a mayonnaise and you want or a meringue, and you want to separate the egg from the white, then that's easier with fridge stored eggs, because it's cooler. They're easier to separate. They don't the yolk and the white are less likely to spread apart. They're thicker. They're more viscous when they're colder. In terms of the health point of view, over here in Europe, the general advice is to store eggs at room temperature, whereas for you guys, I believe the official advice is to store it in the fridge. Am I right there?
That's where I keep mine.
Historically, the reason for that is that the rates of salmonella in the US have been a bit higher than in the UK and Europe, although now there's much less of a difference. The other reason behind it is that the cleaning process, eggs in the US are generally cleaned before they're sold, and they're sprayed as they're cleaned, and sometimes chemicals are used in the cleaning process. And the fear is that when that cleaning process strips off some of the protective outer coat called the cuticle on the eggshell, and that protective outer coat serves to help stop any bugs that are on the outside on the shell from penetrating inside. So the fear is that if that's been stripped away a bit, you've weakened the egg's defenses a bit, and so the chance of it getting infected and so going rotten and bad and dangerous is higher, and so it's best to keep them in the cold, which will slow down any possibility of bugs growing. Whereas in the UK and in Europe, they say you don't want to put it in the fridge because it causes condensation to fall on the outside of the egg, and that will encourage the growth of bugs on the surface of the egg. Ultimately, though, I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference. They do keep longer if you keep them in the fridge, but whatever you do, don't keep them in the fridge door, because if you're in the fridge door, you're opening and closing the fridge door, the temperature of the eggs is going up and down, and you're shaking the eggs the whole time, and that's thinning the whites, and so you're gonna end up with a much poorer egg when you come to use it. So get rid of the egg tray thing that always comes with the fridge, and put it inside, maybe in the box and towards the back. And if you put it in a closed container, that will stop flavors from getting in, because even though the shell, it looks hard, it's actually porous, and gases can come in and leave from that egg. So it can actually absorb strong flavors from things. I don't know if you've got like cheeses or pickled onions or something, I don't know, something really stinky in your fridge can taint the flavor of that egg a bit. And it's this property of the shell that can let gases go in and out that means that you can judge how fresh an egg is. Over time, gas escapes from the egg, and there's a little kind of bubble of air under one of the edges of the egg, and that's called an air cell. And over time, that cell gets bigger and bigger and bigger as the egg itself dehydrates a little bit and gas leaves. And it's this ability for gases to come in and out of the eggshell that means that we can also judge how fresh an egg is. So over time, the egg inside starts to lose its moisture and it dehydrates a little bit. As it does that, through these tiny little microscopic pores that are in this in the shell, air gets pulled in. And there's a little bubble just underneath the surface of the egg called the air cell. And this bubble of air gets bigger and bigger and bigger over time. And we think that little bubble of air is designed to get bigger so that if there is a chick growing inside the egg, that will be its first gasp of air that it will have before it cracks out through the shell. It gives it its first breath so to help it on its way out. But over time, that air cell, the amount of air in your egg gets bigger. And so you can test how big the air cell is. You can either hold up to your ear and give it a shake, and if it's sloshing around, you can hear it moving around inside. That means that it isn't a fresh egg. Put it in some water, and if it stands on end, then it's starting to get a bit old. It's probably about 3 weeks old. And if it floats to the surface, it's 4 or 5 weeks old or older, and it's probably off by that point.
I have learned so much today.
Me too.
I feel at least 15% smarter than I did at the start of this interview.
There'll be a test later.
Yes. Well, I'm prepared. I've been making notes. However, we now have one last question for you.
Yes.
And that is, what is the last song you listened to before you joined us for this podcast?
Wow. What's the last song I listened to? Well, actually, I was being a bit sort of posh and cultured and listening to some semi-classical music by a composer called Carl Jenkins. which makes me sound really sort of cultured. But I guess that's not really a song. It's just kind of, it's nice because you can put it on in the background and it doesn't distract you too much. But I am a closet heavy metal fan, and there was a heavy metal gig just in our town this last weekend, and so I think that was probably the last. It was some random heavy metal band playing something loud and screamy. That was probably the last song I actually listened to.
Oh, that's amazing.
Defy your expectations. There you go.
There you go. No, it's fantastic. Well, thank you so much once again for being on the show today. It was very educational, I have to tell you that.
Excellent. Well, yes. Nice to chat with you guys, and hope that you have much success in your future cooking ventures.
Love this show? Tell us why in a 5-star review on iTunes, and we'll read it on the air. Also, make sure you are a subscriber. If you want to reach out to say hi or have a question about a recent episode, yay, well, feel free to email us at podcast@fitbottomedgirls.com. And if this podcast jives perfectly with your brand, consider sponsoring the show. Get more info by emailing advertising@fitbottomedgirls.com. Find all kinds of Fit Bottom goodness online and on social media at Fit Bottom Girls, Fit Bottom Mamas, Fit Bottom Eats, and Fit Bottom Zen. And if books and movies are your thing, check out the other podcast I co-host called Book versus Movie, which you can find anywhere where you search for podcasts. Thanks for listening.